Thank you very much, Tristan Hest. It is really my great pleasure to welcome you all here. I'm absolutely delighted. Thank you for joining this exciting session at the Fehmarnbelt Days 2021. It is really superb, I think, that we can have a tight discussion, which only is really a starting point to a bigger project, and that is a project of linking women across our region. And it is so my pleasure to invite you all to join this first kickoff meeting in the event Building Bridges, Connecting Women in the Fehmarnbelt region, that has been organized by the Senate Chancellery of the Free and Hanseatic City of Hamburg in close cooperation with a whole number of organizations, which I want to name because we want to know about each other and make sure that we can follow up with each other if we find links and dots that we want to connect with one another. So we cooperated with European Women's Management Development, the Fehmarnbelt Business Council, Frauen in die Aufsichtsräte Hanse, the Chambers of Commerce of Hamburg and Lübeck, the Helga Stöter Foundation, the Ministry of Justice, Europe and Consumer Protection of Schleswig-Holstein, the Association of Female Entrepreneurs, VDU of Hamburg and Schleswig-Holstein, and FIM Women in Management. So that means it's really an impressive list of supporters, and thank you all for that. The Fehmarnbelt Days bring together stakeholders from the region to discuss how cooperation can be enhanced. And I think it comes at a particularly important and exciting time for all of us when connectivity can eventually really kick off. So this session marks the first time that this enhanced networking is done specifically from a female perspective. And today we want to explore how women and women's networks can benefit from the Fehmarnbelt Fixed Link and what women from both sides of the Fehmarnbelt can also learn from one another. Before I start, I want to encourage you to place your questions for those of you who are participating and comments in the chat. And I will take up questions and comments, and we will make sure that we discuss them and respond to them. I shall also say that after the hour that we want to spend here, there is a networking session. I will explain in the end how we're going to get there in the service of the conference organizers. And for now, I am very happy to introduce 4 splendid panelists to you. A very warm welcome to Lydia Bahn, who is the CEO of Asono GmbH and chairwoman of the Ostholstein Plön Business Association. Lydia came to Germany at the age of 20. As a late repatriate, she studied mathematics, specializing in computer science and computational linguistics. Together with her husband, Thomas Bahn, she founded the IT company Asono near Kiel in 2004. And recently both were awarded the IBM Cognitive Excellence Award for their work in the field of artificial intelligence. A warm welcome to you, Lydia. As an honorary office, I should add Lydia Bahn serves as chairwoman of the Ostholstein Plön Business Association, so covering precisely the German region adjacent to the Fehmarnbelt Fixed Link. Next speaker, I'm very happy to have with us Svenja Hahn, member of the European Parliament for the German Free Democratic Party. A very warm welcome to you. At the European Parliament, Svenja is working on questions related to the internal market, trade policy, and artificial intelligence, as well as women's rights and gender equality. She's a native of Hamburg, and it's great to have you. Svenja Hahn was previously president of the European Liberal Youth from 2018 to 2020, and has been the first vice president of the European Liberal Forum since 2020. She's an alumni of the European Women's Academy. Welcome to you, Svenja, as well. And welcome very warmly to Daria Kribonos, who is joining us as the CEO of the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. Daria's institute works on global trends and their societal and business implications. Daria's expertise and experience includes working for the chief economist and enterprise risk management in the AP Moller Maersk Group. She has co-authored a whole number of reports on geopolitics, the future of global trade, and sustainability. Welcome to you warmly as well, Daria. And last but certainly no least, warm welcome to Sylvia Schwag-Serger, a professor at Lund University, where Sylvia is currently a member of the Swedish Prime Minister's Innovation Council, as well as the Austrian Council for Research and Technological Development. She holds a PhD in economic history from the London School of Economics and Political Science, the LSE, and has spent 20 years working with innovation policies in Sweden and China, has been commissioned as expert by the OECD, the European Commission, and several national governments. Between 2018 and 2020, she was deputy president of Lund University. So you see, we really have 4 very important perspectives and experiences that are coming together here. And without further ado, I really want to get into the discussion and to the conversation, and just to open a little bit the space of, you know, what the opportunities are. I want to start with Lydia. Lydia, you are chairwoman of the Ostholstein-Plön Business Association, which has more than 300 member companies, if I'm well informed, representing some 15,000 employees. So speaking about the Fehmarnbelt tunnel and the new opportunities it will bring, do you look at this issue specifically from a female perspective as well, and from the perspective of female entrepreneurs?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm going to speak German. After 1 year of COVID, I did not dare to speak English here. I do understand a lot of English, but I feel better when I can speak German. So I represent this business association exactly in that region where this link is supposed to be built. And this is why it is very exciting for all of us. And obviously, in this association, there's a lot of men who are represented, but also very many women. For 20 years, I was in a club a business club of international women, and we were working on providing more opportunities for women and for them to actually really benefit from those opportunities. Now, I heard at the beginning there was a wonderful video, and it was said in the beginning there was a lot of discussion about this tunnel, whether it should be done at all. I've heard a lot of words of thanks by bodies and institutions who have solved all these problems and questions, and that the financials are insured now. And the question is now, how can we make use of this potential? I would like to go even further. It's not just about how, but also who. It's always about people. Who is supposed to help us to fully benefit from all this potential? And women are 50% of the population. And it was written in big letters, women in power. I like that a lot. And it is my concern, of what I would like to see is, I don't want to look back in 10 years and say, yes, it was a slogan, women in power, but we're still in Germany here, and the opportunities that were provided to us were not really made use of. So what is really important is, yes, that we've forged networks. This round here, this circle here is fantastic. For me, this is a great start in order to provide a platform for women and to inform them, to make sure that networks are created and that we can really make sure that we use all these potentials.
Thanks so much, Lydia, for opening the lens here. And I want to follow up and ask also Daria a similar question. And that is, I mean, you run the think tank Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies, which investigates developments and trends in a variety of fields, such as urban development, culture, economy. And so the question I have is, does gender play a role here, and in what ways? Because it's always good to have evidence-based informed policy making, in the sense that, you know, if we want to untap the potential, it would be very interesting to hear how you are looking at the gender perspective in your research, Dasha.
And thank you very much also for having me. Well, the way we look at gender is also, when you look into the future, which we do, you can't help but look back. And I think the way we look at it is so much lost potential. So whether you go to a museum or you go through Nobel Prize winners of the last 105 years or so, you're looking at one side of the population. And not only that, you're looking at a particular geography also. So we're looking at it not as a it's a problem and let's do something about it because it's been talked about so much as a problem. But I also think we're trying to flip it and say there's so much potential. So this is where we've gotten by tapping into such limited resources on the globe. When I say limited, I say, well, 50% were gone in terms of the talent pool. And then between that, you also had wealth, etc. So we're looking at it from the point of view of where would we have been with science? We wrote a provocative article saying, could we have had another Mozart and could we have cured cancer by now? Because, and I know you can't double talent, but if we assume the talent is uniformly distributed across the globe, we could have had double the size of the museums. We could have had double the size of the scientific achievements, etc., had we only tapped in to double the potential. So we're trying to look at it from a point of view of a little bit of an idealistic look at how much we've been missing. That's the one side. The other side is when you mention cities in particular, which I think are an interesting point, is if we look at Project Drawdown, we're comparing climate solutions across all climate solutions. So be it whether you plant a tree, or you teach girls in terms of family planning, etc., or you build solar panels, or you have cows grazing differently. So this is a project that looks across all climate solutions and try to compare them. Well, family planning and girl education actually come out as the top climate solution over the next 30 years. And I think that's that's a starking idea because we usually look at science, energy, we need to drive different cars, we need to not lose our food, etc. But actually investing in women is not just a business proposition, it's one of the biggest solutions to some of the biggest problems that we have. And doing that, it's making girls feel safe. So the future cities, be it more lights, be it better governance, be it whatever. So the safety, education, and investment in women is not just a charity case, it's an investment proposal, not just financially, but also in terms of climate. So we look at it in many different aspects, but in the urban space, in the climate challenges, in the potential for science and arts, etc., it's all there. So.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much, Daria, for mapping this out. Thinking of our city and region, that is Hamburg, I already start to have really, some ideas along your framing or your mapping of the potential that really is there. And I like the way you said, let's not look too much at shortcomings, but let's look at potential and untap that. I want to bring this to Svenja Hahn. Svenja, you've been a member of the European Parliament since 2019. And if you look at indices on gender equality, it strikes that Scandinavian countries often do better than Germany. And in the European Gender Equality Index, just to give an example, Sweden and Denmark are ranked first and second, respectively, while Germany is only ranked 12th. So what is the EU or the European Parliament doing to promote gender equality throughout Europe? And I think here is one learning that also this network could be useful for, Svenja.
Now I'm unmuted. Absolutely, I think there's a lot we can learn from the Nordics. One figure I always like to look at is the number of female politicians in parliaments, because that always gives kind of a good indicator about how it's looking. And if we look at the European Parliament, we have 41% women, which is roughly 10% above the average. When we look to the Nordic countries, we see 57% in Finland, 53% in Sweden, and 50% in Denmark. So we clearly see the Nordics must be doing something better, because apparently they have more women participating in shaping politics and shaping the future. So where is this coming from? And it's, of course, a different culture that must be clearly set. It's a different cultural mindset we see in the Nordic countries, but also it's a mix of political measures. So the question is, what can the European Union do to support gender equality? And last year in March, the Commission proposed their plan for gender equality. And before that, they conducted a study and looked at a very broad topic of issues. For example, they concluded that every third woman in Europe has experienced physical or sexual violence. Women have 16% more university degrees, but earn significant less, and only 8% of the CEOs in the EU are women. So we see there are a lot of issues they found, and of course only for part of that the EU has an original responsibility, because we remember a lot of parts that are issues are social policies which are in topics of member state responsibilities. But there is something that the EU can do, and it's called gender mainstreaming, which means including the aspect of gender equality in all policies the EU is doing. Let me give you one example. I'm working in the Trade Committee, which is the most female committee, by the way. We have 40% female members. And we conclude that, and we see that women are less benefiting from the economic benefits of trade. So we're taking a particular look in that and including the gender perspective in trade agreements, ensuring that women are participating in the economy. And this is the way the European Union is trying to approach it with the gender equality. But I think long term, what we need is more of a Nordic relaxed mindset to family, to gender equality, and to female leadership. But also we see it maybe in Eastern Europe as well, where everyone had to work back in the communist days, and women were not staying out of the workforce when they had children. So we have a lot of different mindset in the EU, and I think it's really significant that we look and learn from each other. Who is doing a good job? Why are they doing a better job than maybe us? And what can we take together from best example? And I think this is why platforms like this are so important, to take together and to create better measures.
Thank you so much, Svenja. I feel we are already getting a lot of entry points, on cultural aspects, but also on structures, on questions of power. So I want to enrich the perspective with bringing Sylvia Schwarzenegger in, with being born in Germany, with also roots in China and America, and now you work with Lund University in Sweden. I think I might say that also diversity plays a strong role for you. If we look at the diversity that is now happening across the Fehmarnbelt tunnel region, the opportunity to grow closer together, there will be employee exchanges, and people will find work on the other side of the tunnel more easily. So that means also there is a lot more interaction that we are likely to witness. So diversity is going to grow. And it would be interesting to hear from you. What do you think needs to be in place for living and working really successfully and untapping that potential of diversity here to the best of our ability, Sylvia? Right, I'm not sure this can be dealt with immediately, but I will get back to Sylvia Schwarzenegger as soon as we have her with her voice on the call. In the meantime, I just want to go into a second set of questions with colleagues. And I think, one of the issues that I now put to Sylvia as well, the diversity, bringing the region closer together through the fixed link of the Fehmarnbelt. In very practical terms, what do you think women on your side of the Fehmarnbelt can learn from women on the other side, and vice versa? So in your analysis, background, daily work, research, what are some of the areas where you expect sort of the most fruitful exchange? And maybe I start again with Lydia.
This is a very good question. In our region here, which is very important for the economic region, is tourism. Now, the question, how can women then participate in the economy? I come from the economy. How can they be more successful, more leaders? I always say you need to have opportunities and tasks that you can cope with. Now, if I look at tourism, in times of Corona, of COVID, it showed that tourism is incredibly important in such metropolitan regions like Copenhagen and Hamburg, industrial cities. Then their tourism is second tier, is not so important because it's leisure, it's not making money, but we have seen that's incredibly important. People always need this counterpole to just working and making money. They need to recover. And so that's what here in this region Ostholstein is given, where we have experience with this. And I think that also on the other side, in the other countries, in Scandinavian countries, we can have a lot of exchange and develop this. And the opportunities that will then arise, we will then be able to seize. It has been said several times in other presentations that it's, so to speak, a tunnel between Copenhagen and Hamburg, which makes me happy. But what my fear is that it's not a tunnel of just 18 kilometers, but like a virtual tunnel between Copenhagen and Hamburg, and the regions, the regions are just there. So the task would be to see really how can we very much connect our regions. For example, a train stops on the way and takes on board people. So the region must also benefit from this. And of course, in addition, the women, and we need to strengthen women here in tourism, in terms of training, so that we can multiply the effect. I come from the IT area, and there, if we talk about ratios or quotas, it's much more difficult. We rarely have women. I used to study IT, and I was one woman of 3. And in business, often it's the same case. You really rarely see women. I also think my feeling is that Scandinavian countries have progressed farther, have advanced more than we have. And I believe we can learn from them and can exchange ideas. And for that, we indeed need actual projects, that you are informed what is happening, what can we do, who can help us to achieve our objectives, no matter whether it's digitalization, climate protection. The range is really huge.
Yes, thanks, Lydia. I think it's also very important what you underline. I mean, the idea that we all have, and we're discussing it a lot in the string network of cities and regions, that will benefit from the Fehmarnbelt. Of course, it is something that should benefit a whole region. And, this is the strong potential that I see also, developing now. And rather not to have sort of only very limited points that will benefit, but really to bring about a new Northern European identity. And a lot of work is done on that. I just want to read out and encourage those who want to put questions also or have comments. That Uta Schulz gave a comment in the chat function and said, great idea. I think this is referring to Svenja, great idea to get support from politics directed towards me and others, that as an intercultural coach, I can confirm that culture and mentality in Germany and the Nordics are different and can complete each other. So there's big potential. So women should network better and support each other better. For example, at the Swedish Chamber of Commerce situated in Hamburg, there is a business women's initiative. And I think this is exactly the kind of information that I think we should also be sharing in this session, because we want to develop further our ties here. I'm still trying to see if I can have Professor Schwarzenegger joining the conversation now. Can you join? Okay, I hear that colleagues are working on trying to sort out, and I do apologize, Professor Schwarzenegger, that there seems to be a technical difficulty. Let me just go and bring this to Daria as well. This question of, how we all know that there is now a Fehmarnbelt tunnel that is being developed and that is scheduled to be opened in 2029, that there is quite a few years in between, and I think it's a very good idea, and I'm sure you will be doing this, to think already now in terms of, what will our regional world look like once the Fehmarnbelt is in place, and what does that mean for our actions and our decisions now, in particular from the perspective of, empowering female potential in this. So how do we mobilize the resources, the stakeholders? What's the best way to use the years that we have ahead of us until connectivity really is in place?
Well, I think for one, of course, something like the Fehmarn link provides it provides a headline, right? Because we've had a border for many, many, many years. And for the last 100 years, it's been stable. So I think we have these neighboring relationships regardless. But I think we're looking at the last 10, 15 years, it's centrifugal forces in Europe pulling Europe apart. So I think, of course, this provides a new headline, a positive headline. So I think one way to do that would potentially harvest some of the energy around a project like this, but also some of the energy in, I was going to say the youth, but these are females my age and older, but entrepreneurs. If anyone wants to move fast, then it's entrepreneurs. So I would, looking for commonalities in agenda points and looking for some of the energy you can harvest in people who are already trying to move faster than we're building the bridge or building the tunnel, and see how could they help some of this along. Are there any particular agendas you can be building across and benefiting from the fact that COVID has shown we don't have to be in the same room to sign contracts. We don't even have to be in the same room to put them together. I think COVID has provided an enormous opportunity in the way we work across distances. So this could be a head start, and then a culmination in the physical interface when the link finally opens. But I think so joint agendas, and then looking for some of these energetic pockets of people who want to move fast across the two different regions, and then have them have some sort of unison rather than looking for all the differences. That we're all nitpicking differences these days and have been for the last 10 years. I think this is a very good and positive spin. But if I may add on something else also, I'm looking at the participant list right now, and I've been browsing the 2 pages of people who are on the call, and it's primarily women. And I think of course it's important that it's primarily women, but it's a little bit, and I know this may sound provocative, but it's a little bit like a lot of vegetarians meeting and deciding that being vegetarian is great. So unless we have the men on the call, unless we engage and it's not an opposition, it's not, the genders vis-a-vis each other, against each other, it is a good business case. So as much as I appreciate and love networking with other women, and, Madeleine Albright's quote that there's a special place in hell for women who don't help each other, we still need to engage with the side who still is a majority in many of these aspects. So I would love for a call like this, 2029, we launched the Fehmarn link, and half of the audience in a call like this is men, because they're equally interested. Their fathers, their husbands, their leaders, their co-workers, etc., who are interested in making this change. That's just a dream.
Thanks, Daria. I think, as a mother of 2 small girls, and whose father is helping tremendously with, all the challenges we have, especially this time in family, I think I completely understand where you're coming from. And I think a lot of us will probably agree to say, it's about untapping excellence. And as it happened over history, there is a lot of excellence that was lost because of structural differences and questions of power. For female participants in our countries and societies. So thank you for pointing that out. I want to also go back to Svenja and ask her, where you, in your work as a politician, you described in the European Parliament, you're working very intensely across nations, across regions all the time. Where do you see the most interesting learning curve, with our neighboring regions in very concrete and specific terms? I assume you must already be talking trade with your colleagues, male or female, on the other side of the fixed Fehmarnbelt tunnel. What does your agenda look like there?
Perfect, thank you. I'm unmuted again. Sorry, apparently I have issues unmuting myself. I hope I'm not a silenced woman here, joke aside. So thank you very much, Ahmed, for that question. I think what is most interesting in the European Parliament that you always need to ask yourself questions, because especially when you're coming from politics and you're coming from a political party, you're thinking, okay, this is the solution to that one issue. And then you're experiencing that someone from the same party family as you, coming from another country, has a very different solution to the same issue. And there's often, of course, more that divides us, but approach to the same situation can very much differ, not only on party political background, but a lot about the country's specific background and history, and the way it is approached. Let me give you one very concrete example. This is not about gender politics, but about energy politics and climate change and combating climate change. We have countries that are very much clear we need nuclear power to combat that. And that is going all over all party sectors, no matter where they're coming from, because it's the countries where this is a technology used. Well, in Sweden, for example, as well, though I know it's a debate in Sweden if it should be used, but more parties are in favor of continuing it. Where they're in Germany, everyone is like, well, okay, we're getting out of nuclear power. So this is always very, very interesting that you always need to, do a lot of more thinking. And I honestly think this is why more female politicians are attracted to the way the European Parliament works, because it's not this opposition and government as you have in national parliaments. It's a very collaborative way of working. You need to work together over party lines, you need to work together over country lines, and coming to one solution together. So I think this is also why we have more female politicians than in many national parliaments, because this is a way I think that is very suited for many women to make politics. Because I often hear from women that are like, oh, I don't want to waste my time in this sideline battles. I want to move something forward. And this is clearly the way the European Parliament is working. So I think we need more of this moving something forward together in politics than just like going in with all elbows and this is what I want to do. So a bit of more collaboration in politics, I think that would be more attractive for women as well to get engaged.
It's a very interesting observation you share from your experience that a network organization that is the European Union and networks across regions run by women and fed and nurtured by women perhaps also feeds to what women are more likely to sort of be enjoy working in and being more efficient in doing that. I want to bring it now back to Sylvia Schwarzenegger and ask her, with your experience personally, but also in your research on diversity. I mean, we are looking at a region, and other speakers have talked about that, that is diverse. There might be a lot of like-mindedness, but there is also difference. So if we conceive this as a region of opportunity, what needs to be happening? What needs to be in place so that both for living and working successfully together with one another, what needs to be in place to make it a success, to really untap the potential?
Thank you very much. And I hope you can hear me now. I'm really sorry. I hope that the problems with the connection to Sweden are not symbolic. I'm very happy to be part of this panel. And I think, as you mentioned before, unfortunately, I couldn't hear all this other speakers, but I've lived in many different contexts. And I think each of the contexts has its own challenges. I grew up in Germany. I've spent a lot of time in the US and in other countries in China. And when you look at Sweden, I think Svenja was talking about that. Sweden is doing extremely well in terms of gender equality, especially in government, academia, and the public sector. Where it's still not doing well is in the private sector. So these are the kind of things that would, so I think my main point for this conversation would be that we have different strengths and weaknesses in the different systems. And I think Dasha and Svenja were already talking about that we should, I think what we need to think about is, when do communities become excluding? And they can be excluding for many different reasons. And so in my lifetime, I've been discriminated against for being a woman, for being non-white, for being non-European. There are all kinds of things you can be discriminated against for, and there are communities that will make sure that they will exclude you. And I think what we need to look at is how, what is the default culture in a context, and how can we bring diversity into this context? And it is, because I'm a professor of innovation and research, what my research has shown me is that when you bring people from different backgrounds together at different ages, different gender, different experiences, is when you really unleash creativity. And I think this is the potential also in this regional integration, because one of the things, for example, where the Nordic countries haven't been as good as I think they should have been is, during the large inflow of refugees into the Nordic countries, it's taken very long, particularly in Sweden, for refugees to enter the labor market, even people with high skills. So, we all have our challenges in not, as Dasha says, utilizing the full potential of the talent that we have at our disposal. And therefore, I think I would see a great potential in learning from each other, in looking at where are certain countries quicker at bringing so-called outsiders into the labor market, into society, where are we better at not having monocultures and decision-making structures, and in being a more inclusive, talent-oriented, and also solution-oriented society, because if we focus on the solutions, then we will get better at defining the talent that can help us bring them. Thank you.
And if I can just have a follow-up question here, if you were to encourage, and in your role as an advisor to politics, if you were to point out a couple of really promising areas, where this could be turned into practice, what would that be?
Well, I think one of them is what I spend a lot of time doing also when I was vice president of the University of Lund, is I try to look at contexts and communities and figure out, how can we make, what is it that makes these contexts very homogeneous? And a lot of them are, a lot of business decisions are still made by white middle-aged men. A lot of, it's kind of interesting because in Sweden, actually, I think it's, somebody said, the combination of childcare, but also very strong anti-discrimination laws. A combination of things has made sure that now women actually are in the majority in a lot of very senior decision-making positions in politics and public administration. So I think the thing to do is take a hard look at your context, look at what unconscious bias you have, because every context has unconscious bias. Also think more about teams. I think the problem is that we tend to recruit people as individuals, but you should look at a team and say, okay, I have a team of very good engineers who also happen to all be 50 and white and male. Maybe I need something else if I want to create a consumer-oriented solution. So I think about teams, think about diversity as a driver of innovation, not as a quota issue. And then also provide the framework conditions. As Svenja said, for women, their time is precious. The COVID pandemic has shown that, there's only so much time you have in your life. And if you have to take care of children, deal with prejudice, deal with bureaucracy, you run out of energy. So you need to provide very obvious good framework conditions where people can thrive. And I think there is still things, a lot has happened in Germany, but I can say that I think the career I've had here in Sweden would have been extremely difficult for a woman my age in Germany with children when I grew up. So, there's a lot of things we can think about it. But as I said, I think we don't also just limit it to the gender aspect. Look at, which communities are being excluded, which talents are not being tapped, as somebody mentioned, and be prepared that all of us have unconscious bias. I'm sure I do too. Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvia. I saw both Dasha and Svenja nodding when you mentioned the term unconscious bias, and I will bring both of them in with their reactions. And I also saw Lydia react to your team, asking for teamwork. We're not only recruiting individuals. So it would be very interesting to hear from you in a minute, Lydia, how you implement this as an entrepreneur and businesswoman. So let's start with Dasha, the unconscious bias that Sylvia brought up, I think for all the right reasons.
Yeah, and I think, it's an interesting aspect, and I think most of us have experienced it in one way or another. I'm not just female, I'm Russian, so always in Denmark, there are many there. And I think Sylvia has a great point that you can slice and dice differences in so many ways that you'll always find something different about each other if that's what you're looking for. I think the unconscious bias is funny because just a small anecdotal evidence, I have one of my directors, so I'm the CEO and I have two male directors. He's a tall, strong, a couple of years older than me, has a bigger physique gentleman, and we were sharing a stage, and we were just introduced as the management team. So the CEO and the director are going to come up and going to say a few words, and we did together. And I felt no need to stress who I am. We are who we are. And then there was a networking exercise afterwards, and we had invited 200 people. And then at some point, someone came up to me, like, "Oh, great speech. When you have time, can you introduce me to your CEO?" And I took no offense, but for me this was an example, because he is bigger, he's older, he's male, he meets the requirements of what people expect to be the CEO. There were two roles to be distributed, and they didn't think of me because it wasn't on my name tag, it wasn't on screen. And crying about it is not going to change because it's so deeply ingrained. I think it's about awareness. I mean, I could get back on the stage, take the microphone. Hey, by the way, if anybody has any questions, I'm the CEO. It's about understanding that they're there. The moment I walk into a room, that means that for the first 5 minutes, they're not really listening because they have no clue who I am, and they ask me to take notes. And they do that. People still, they ask me to take notes. So I think it's about acknowledging that this is going to take a while. So rather than being militant about it, I think sometimes it's one, of course, recognizing your own. As Silvia mentioned, we all have them. When I look at my team, it's invite someone in the room who you definitely disagree with. If you had a meeting where everybody agrees, someone either lied or you didn't get the right input. That's extremely important. It's the moment you get extremely comfortable in a room, especially as a senior, this is when you know something is wrong because no one challenged you. So I think we should all be aware. So you can only change things by your own behavior. And then the other thing is we need to change these biases with the respect for the pace that it will take, because the gentleman who asked me to introduce him to my colleague meant no offense, but it's so deeply ingrained with him that if I got up and I said, hey, you guys, it's in him. And a lot of the senior stakeholders out there still have that viewpoint. So it's about knowing it's there, somehow trying to deal with it, and then teach our girls and my stepdaughter at home is to act in a certain way that they make a change in the next generation. And I know it's not very ambitious, but it is what it is. The demographics are what they are. It takes time. So I think awareness, fully recognize the bias. And that was just one funny example. And then just being vocal, but accept that it's there. At least not accept the notion, but accept that it's there, and denying it or being militant about it is not going to make it go away.
Yeah, thanks for really being, bringing out these examples. I had to laugh because I can also come up with a whole number. I'm sure a lot of us can, where, sometimes, of course, I see myself with an unconscious bias and others are pointing it out to me. So I think it's very important also to find a way to address that with the aim of bringing people together ultimately again, and not to go adversarial. And I think this is also a role that I believe we have to take more, because men can often perhaps not be so comfortable about being pointed out towards this, being part of their intervention. Svenja, please come in on the unconscious bias.
Well, as someone that's working on a European level, I encounter a lot of stereotype and prejudice basically daily, because there's a lot of different cultures and backgrounds coming together. And I always remember an encounter with a former colleague who is from the US. And when he moved to Brussels, he told me he was surprised to learn how European discrimination works, because he automatically assumed Southern Europeans would be most discriminated because of a darker skin color, because this is kind of what he was familiar with from the US, he said, where discrimination is towards Black people an issue, or brown people. And he was surprised to learn that discrimination in the EU is very versatile, like towards Eastern Europeans, that they're like lazy or stealing jobs or criminals, or Southern Europeans being lazy or whatever. So that there are a lot of prejudices in the EU, and that they're very, very diverse. And that really reminded me as well. And I always have this stuck in my head. And we see that a lot, and we see a lot of stereotypes always perpetrated again towards all kind of groups, towards women, towards different countries, towards different social groups, and that we often see them perpetrated all over again. And as an EU politician, I always see it in debates, for example, about money, about when it comes about solidarity funds. It's like, oh, we have to pay for Italian pensions, we have to pay for that, and they're going into pensioner age at that level. So what Silvia said is really not only about gender equality, it's also about diversity. It's also about challenging those prejudices. I mean, prejudice exists, but they don't have to exist forever. So it's really important to challenge them and to ask them, okay, do I need to make this comparison right now? Is this really a necessary comparison? Where's this coming from? And of course, see what in political means can be done. Because I don't think, for example, often the discussion then only goes to quota. That is not the magic wand that will fix everything. It's a deeper rooting issue, for example. So we really need to go to the roots of issues, and that is a very diverse field. That's why I'm a very strong supporter of gender mainstreaming or diversity streaming, to really have those in all aspects of policy making, and not just say, okay, we're doing better childcare, women, you're covered now. But to really think and consider this aspect in all kind of areas of policy making, to be more inclusive, to be more open. And this is really the political challenge that we need to encounter, despite all of us as a society always challenge prejudice that are existing.
Thanks, Svenja. I see in the chat we have a little conversation between Uta Schulz saying, isn't it even more important than that we as women support each other in networks so that we will be more visible in society, on the markets, and in politics? And
was that gone directed to me as a question, or?
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I just had I think, a quick problem of technical nature. I just wanted to reiterate a little discussion that's been going on. Uta Schulz saying, don't we even have to integrate more than as women's networks? And Corinna Nienstedt from Hamburg State Chancellery saying, yes, it's right, we need to do that, but we should also join the mostly male networks and be visible there. So otherwise we will not be able to change the situation. This just to highlight a little bit of commenting and important points that are being raised, and encourage everybody who wants to make those comments and put questions, please continue to do so. I want to come back to one issue that I think importantly Sylvia addressed, and that was the diversity of teams. I mean, ultimately in terms of, employing, we're employing individuals, but only on the surface. I mean, these are people that will be working in teams. And so since you had a reaction to this, Lydia, I want to ask you as an entrepreneur, how are you looking at the diversity in teams issue?
But also, when forming the team, you say, okay, how do I want to recruit this position? I found it very important, Ms. Serger, what you said, the unconscious bias, and how do we encounter that, and then we will be able to compose good teams. So I think it's incredibly important for us to be conscious that this distortion is there, the bias is there. That's a historical question. People don't mean it like that. We just need to be conscious of it. Only if we perceive it, then we can encounter this problem. In my history with my first boss, I developed a project, I programmed, I was an expert, and I went to a presentation with the customer, and the customer told my boss, good that you brought your secretary. I didn't even know that this perception existed. I was so surprised and asked myself, what did I do to be perceived in such a way as a secretary? And then, I mean, the way I grew up, I was always on an equal level. And when I studied all, it was fine. And then the first time I encountered this was in my professional life. And then I had the discussion with myself and asked myself, how can I deal with this? Maybe I need to preempt on that. I need to anticipate this and present myself, tell them in which function am I there, and then that's how they are going to perceive me. Also for teams, it's incredibly important. In my company, I really have very strong women, and I am really thrilled and happy to have them. And I see also that the teams work better because of that. You also mentioned an important point, and I'm really much an advocate of that. I think we really need to, in the normal life, need to really, in this men-woman projects, we need to really get engaged, not just separate ourselves as women and discuss among each other. It's very important to learn from each other, but as you said, it's important to go in there, to represent yourself, to never be in the second row and really go there, interact with the men. That's very important, that you know what is happening, to encounter that and go out there and don't lay back waiting. Maybe educated like that, that to wait until someone asks you to say something. No, that you really present yourself more strongly and go out there and say, I have something to say. And that, I believe, is that what brings women as individuals forward in its mixed world, but also that strengthens teams. And teams are strong due to diversity and a mixture between men and women.
Thanks, Lydia. I also really like the way you talked about role models, and that even though us as women, we didn't feel for most of the time when we were in, our apprenticeships or, at university, we didn't experience the difference because the male cohort is essentially thinking like us. But then as soon as you're starting to move up, this is going more marked. And then you suddenly realize that you actually have to more proactively argue your case and stand your ground in that way. And I think I've experienced also the importance of role models in that way. There have been a whole number of issues, including the question of, is it all essentially in the end about structures and quotas? The question was addressed on, the underrepresentation of women in supervisory boards, and in management boards, which still in our 3 countries is quite significant, which is, I think, a very important discussion. And Svenja pointed out, it's not only about that, it's also about mindset. I feel we need to raise that. But at the same time, we are running a little bit out of time with what we want to discuss here today. And so I want to suggest that really this is only the starting point, because we decided to join forces here as our region develops, which is a very exciting path. And this is an opportunity to getting to know each other and already try to create ties between each other. So I thought in the preparation and colleagues helping me to do that of this session, that it would be good to have in the end a quick round of, if any of you could draft a wish list, one wish that you could have for the further development of the Fehmarnbelt region in the coming years, something that you would prioritize personally, that you would want to engage in, or that you think others should be picking up because it hasn't been done so far. So on your personal wish list, and we'll do a quick round and start, I suggest with Sylvia, what would be on that wish list? The wish list of Sylvia on, how the Fehmarnbelt region can be developed. What would be on top of that list?
Okay, now I think you can hear me.
Yes, very well.
Thank you. I think, as has been said before, one of the great things of bringing countries together is that you really can learn things. I think we should also drop our own prejudices and take an open look at, just as an example, Sweden, with all its gender equality, has not produced a female prime minister. Why is that? So I think if we could take a hard look at each other and at ourselves and think about how we can learn from each other, what I think would be fantastic if we could create this region as a true talent region. And in order to do that, you have to have a completely different view of competence. I think all 3 regions still suffer from a rather formulaic and formalistic approach to qualifications. You have to go to the right universities, you have to have the right certificates. Could we change that? Because we're not going to change our future by looking at, ancient professions and ancient qualification, systems for qualifications. Could we find a new way to design and recognize and valorize competence that comes in all forms and shapes? Thanks.
Great, excellent. Thanks, Sylvia. Let's do the rounds and ask Svenja what is top of her wish list for the development of the Fehmarnbelt region.
Well, as we're especially talking about women, it's really about enhancing collaboration and really learning from each other. What we can learn from each other, because what Sylvia said is very true. Germany lacks a bit of women in the broadness, but we have women on the spotlight. So everyone apparently can do something, but there's a lot we can learn from each other, and especially having a business background myself, working on politics business aspect. I see that especially female participation in business life and in the economic life is still behind. And I see there's much more we can learn from other countries in our region. So this learning from each other, absolutely. And coming from the Trade and Single Market Committee, I would really wish for the tunnel to be finalized to enhance the trade in our region. But that is not so much with the topic of the panel today.
But I think it very nicely ties into the aim of, making also best use of the talent and the excellence that is there as we jointly develop this region. I see in the chat that there is some colleagues are saying we need to be aware of each other. There is a lot of networks, and we just have to connect the dots here and there, which I think this event can also contribute to doing. Let me go to Dasha and ask about her number one on the list of how can we make it work in the Fehmarnbelt.
I'll be very brief. I just hope that in 8-10 years, we're discussing skills and capabilities rather than gender, so that we're looking for the human aspects of what is it people are bringing to the table and raise some of the things where women are intrinsically better equipped sometimes. I mean, that we talk about empathy and leadership, or we talk about diplomacy, or, so we actually talk about the capabilities that would bring a certain type of people forward rather than just the gender. And then I hope that in 10 years, the next, be it the Baltics who want to build a bigger highway between each other, they look at the Fehmarn and say, hey, what did they do that brought them closer together, so that we become some sort of beacon that people actually look at and try to copy later. I guess that would be brief.
Great, thank you, Dasha. And then let's finally conclude with Lydia. What is your most important issue that you would want to focus on as we develop the region?
Thank you. On my wish list, it would say that the region that is Ostholstein-Plön, that is what I'm representing, that it is so much involved in the project that in that period of time and in the future, looking back, we were able to say that the slogan, Women Empower, that we have really lived it, because there were projects, there were field activities where we as women could represent ourselves, be shown, and then female role models were created from which others could learn, and so that the next generation in school, girls, they do not question that anymore. Technical profession, yes, no, does it suit me? No, that they really live gender equality, and that would be very great.
Excellent. Thank you so much to all of you. Svenja Hahn, Dasha Krivonos, Lydia Bahn, and Sylvia Schwarzenegger for joining. Thank you to all of you who made contributions in the commentaries and the questions section. I think this was a really impressive merging of women working in different areas, and bringing us together here. I think holds some opportunity. We do hope that with this event we managed to give a little bit of a support of this regional perspective, where also from a Hamburgian point of view we see a lot of potential, and to empower also women in this process as we go along this process of opportunity. I want to say apologies if there were any technical issues that we tried to deal with, and thank all colleagues that were supporting the setting up of this meeting. And I do not want to close here immediately, because there is an opportunity to continue in the networking section. And that means you just have to access the networking lounge from the main conference lobby, where you see the two armchairs in the foreground that say networking. And you're then asked to enter your name and take a quick photo using your webcam. And then there you are in comfortable chairs, just exchanging business cards as we normally would in person, and to follow up on some of the questions that have been discussed. So I do hope to see you there on the other side. I conclude this session here now with thanks to all of you, and alles Gute, all best from Hamburg.